Hi everyone, my name is Jessica and I will be presenting a lecture on Nepantla Leadership, Feminist Theories in the Workplace. So my purpose with this lecture is to go into more detail on this particular feminist theory, Nepantla theory, as well as a few others to illustrate their importance in not only understanding your employees, your peers, but also your communities that you serve via your leadership position. I'll be going into the Anzaldúa reading as well as the De Los Santos Upton's readings. And while those theories are pretty specific to the border and marginalized groups, I feel they can be applied to any workplace that values their employees' overall well-being and productivity. Also, I'd just like to demonstrate how these feminist theories are all related, they're all interconnected, and further, they are pioneered by women of color. So we can get into an introduction on the term Nepantla. So Anzaldúa says it's an Aztec word for torn between ways. And De Los Santos Upton says it is a liminal in-between stage characterized by chaos and disorientation, where individuals experience disassociations, breakdowns, and buildups of their identities. In this transformational space, individuals begin to question ideas, tenets, and even identities inherited through family, education, and culture as different perspectives collide. So Sarah de los Santos Upton explains the ways in which she experienced that in-between state growing up and into her college years, as she felt she wasn't one thing or another. She wasn't brown or white. She wasn't Spanish fluent. She was living in that in-between space. And she says, I was surrounded by my mother's Mexican family and felt rooted in Mexican culture and traditions. But my inability to speak Spanish sometimes made me feel as though I did not quite fit in. The more I looked around me, however, the more I realized that many of my fellow fronterizas felt the same sense of in-betweenness, never quite belonging on either side of the border, but feeling at home in the borderlands. So the feminist theoretical frameworks I'm referencing obviously include Nepantla, as well as third space feminist and intersectionality. Now, there are others, of course, but I believe these three have a lot in common, and they also center that space that isn't typically seen or often understood, and that's that concept of third space, and I will go into how Nepantla and intersectionality relate to all of that. So Nepantla Gloria Anzaldúa says that it's positioned to disrupt traditional understandings of identity. She says it's a space where you are never entirely inside, always somewhat outside every group or belief system. And third space feminist is a feminist theory that I have studied specifically in regard to Adela Silicona. And she says it's exploring the ways in which spaces that are not one thing or another, if they're not binary or dichotomous, then they must be considered a third space. She also talks about building an ideal coalitional consciousness that informs the need for authorized knowledges and theories to be accountable and accessible to the communities they are supposedly representing. And finally, we have intersectionality, which has been pioneered by Kimberly Crenshaw. And she says intervention strategies based solely on the experiences of women who do not share the same class or race backgrounds will be of limited help to women who, because of race and class, face different obstacles. So basically the crux of intersectionality is just understanding that everyone exists at different intersections, right? So when she says intervention strategies, she's saying that those intervention strategies that are developed for white women are not going to be as helpful, beneficial, productive for Black women, because white women and Black women exist at different intersections. There are the intersections of class, race, gender, education level. There's a lot of intersections that come into play to create your positionality, to have you where you are in our society. And so those intersections do not look the same for everybody. And so if you have a one-size-fits-all intervention strategy, it's not a good idea. It's not going to be accessible. It's not going to be representative of everybody. And so taking the time to understand where everybody exists is important. And so again, I feel it's Nepantla, third space, intersectionality. It's understanding those spaces that we all exist in that aren't one thing or another. They aren't, you know, up or down, right or left, black or white. They are varied, multicolored, very unique to us, right? So some examples of third space realities. Education versus none. So then the idea that like you have to have an extensive educational background in order to be successful is very black or white. And there's no space there in that frame of mind for lived experiences. So lived experiences often exist in this third space where you kind of have to talk about them. You have to like push yourself out there. You can't just write it on your resume the same way you could write it if you had, you know, a bachelor's or a master's. So there's that space for lived experiences. It's the third space reality. It's very valuable. Not everybody has, you know, has college accessible to them. So those lived experiences are very important and can really help our position as a leader, and also just help our businesses thrive. Citizen versus migrant. So these next ones are more specific to the El Paso area, but citizen versus migrant. So there's that space from being a migrant to, you know, being a citizen. There's like that third space where you're not a migrant and you're not a citizen. You're on your way to becoming a citizen, perhaps. But there's that third space that exists, right? Like you're not American and you're not Mexican. You're not legal, but you're not illegal. Like, you know, so you're working your way to becoming whatever it is that you want to become in the country that you've migrated to. Also within family structures, we've read a lot about mixed status families, and that's a reality here in El Paso, and I'm sure it's a reality for people all across the world, right? But here, migrant versus first generation, we have the parents who are migrants status, and then their first generation American-born kids. There's that third space within families even that is really, really interesting to look into and to understand that dynamic between families within a family. And another aspect that I think is actually really important to me is that other cultures exist on the border, specifically here in El Paso, right? We talk about Mexican and American, we talk about Chicano, we talk about white and brown, Spanish and English, but there are so many other cultures that exist here, and I believe those cultures exist in a third space. We have a large Asian community, we have a large Black community, Lebanese community, and of course we have the military. And I mean, yes, you can say that the military is definitely centered in a lot of ways, which it really is, but it is a culture of a third space because a lot of military people don't stay here. It's just like an in-between space, right? They're just here for while they're whatever stationed here, and then they leave. But these other cultures do exist in El Paso and do stay here and lay down roots, and we often overlook them. We often don't understand or care to look into the significance of these other cultures on our US-Mexico border. So why is this all important? So in a leadership position, it's important to understand beyond duality. Again, for all the reasons I've explained, just understanding that, you know, there are locations that people exist in that are not one thing or another. They're varied. There's no duality, right? Like it's much more layered than that, and it's much more complex than that, and that's a great thing. That's diversity. So understanding beyond duality is important when you're in a leadership position. Also breaking up patriarchal systems. So Anzaldúa says, we need a new masculinity and the new man needs a movement. And I know this is more in regard to Chicano and Mexican American issues of machismo. But for me, breaking up patriarchal systems, you know, not only men participate in patriarchal systems, women participate in those as well. And they are oppressive systems. They don't let everyone have a turn. They don't let everyone have a moment. They're very domineering positions, and it's not just men who take the lead in those, it's women too. And so replicating patriarchal systems is harmful, and so we need to break those up. That's why these feminist theories can be applied and why they are important. In your community, audience participation. If you don't have an audience participating in whatever business it is that you are conducting, you don't have a business, right? Like you need that audience participation, whether it be from your community, community outreach, if you're a professor and you need people taking your class, different things. You need that audience participation. So it's important to do all of these things and to implement these third space realities, understanding of these third space realities in your classrooms, in your business, in your community arts outreach programs, so that you have that full audience participation. Also accessibility and representation. All of, understanding these and implementing these feminist theories allow for more accessibility. They allow for more representation. And so if you are existing in one of those third spaces, making things more accessible to you is going to be great. It's going to make you want to invest in that business or that, cultural institution or whatever it is, because you feel represented there. So accessibility and representation are incredibly important. And I believe that these feminist theories are ways to achieve that. So tangible ways to implement these theories in a leadership position, coalition building, right? By implementing these theories, you are pretty much starting that coalition. You are starting to build coalitions within your peers, within your employees, within the community. And that's what it's all about. If you want to consider productivity something positive, I think productivity would be a coalition building. Productivity doesn't necessarily have to reflect output, right? It can reflect like how well are you treating your employees? How good do your employees feel working for you? So building coalitions is a tangible way to implement one of these theories. And then even creating non-hierarchical leadership. So non-hierarchical leadership, not the person in charge isn't always the one with the best background, whether that be educational or lived experiences, right? So when we create non-hierarchical leadership, we allow for everyone to have a moment, right? Everyone to really truly feel like they are giving what they can to their workplace, that they're giving what they can to their project. It's not a hierarchical system where it's like, no, the person in charge, gives out the orders and everybody follows along. It's like, no, that it's really building, again, going back to coalition, right? Coalition building. It's really building teams and really working on everyone's input and everyone's backgrounds and everyone's experiences to really push forward the goal and the mission. So in the community, again, community coalition building, De Los Santos Upton says, through building coalitions, individuals uncover and experience new ways of identifying and relating to one another, while at the same time unveiling new possibilities and strategies for combating marginalization and oppression. So the same thing as in a leadership position, a tangible way to implement is, these coalition buildings. You just implement these theories and I feel like you're immediately building coalitions, right? And through building coalitions, as De Los Santos Upton says, you uncover and experience new ways of relating to each other and also unveiling possibilities and strategies for combating marginalization and oppression. So you become, that company, or you become that business or that classroom, right, that values everyone's input and values everyone's output. And yeah, and it helps build coalitions. So that concludes my lecture. I hope that was clear, and I hope that was helpful. I mean, it's still something that I am exploring in regard to leadership and feminist theory, how to combine the two. So I just thought it would be great to present these to you all, and also just to help you maybe explore other feminist theories. Thank you so much.